Welcome to Jerry Berry's Friend-Tastic Library, the podcast where I usually talk about fantastic people and their fantastic lives, or everyday people and their fantastic lives. But today we're not talking to those people. Today you're just talking to me about the books I read in February, so it'll be fun. We'll talk about actual books instead of human books. Sounds creepy. Anyways, for February, I had a goal of reading 12 books because in January I made my goal 7 and I blew right past that and read 16. So for February, I was like, okay, I'll set my goal to be 12. And I read 14. So go me. Round of applause. Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay. So you'll also get to see, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll get to see little glimpses of my reading bullet journal as we go because I'm really proud of it. I love it so much. If you're listening to this on Spotify, you can always check out my Instagram. I usually post pictures on there of my bullet journals. Yeah. I'll probably have a link to my Instagram in the description box. So yeah. I always keep like little stats. For January, I made a little window here. For January, I made like a slideshow for you guys to look at, and I thought that was way too much work, and I just wanted to hang out and talk to you guys about the books I read. So, no slideshow today. I'll probably go through my stats real quick at the end. But, so, first things first. The first book I completed in February was the other half of Happy. This is a middle grade book that I read with my son, Jared, and we started it in January, but we didn't finish until February because we only read for about 30 minutes a night, and some nights we don't read because it happens, you know, whatever. So the other half of Happy was so incredibly cute. I loved it. Jared gave it 5 stars. I gave it 5 stars. I believe he said he would give it 15 if he could or something like that. If you follow me on Goodreads, you'll see all my reviews for my books that I read as well. Yeah, so anyways, it's about a Guatemalan American family. So the dad is from Guatemala originally. They all live in America now. They grew up with very American heavy culture to try to fit in with the Texas culture. And then eventually some of the dad's family moves to Texas next to them. And the dad suddenly wants them to have more of a Guatemalan culture. So the main character is a 12-year-old girl. And she's like struggling to find herself now. She's like, what the heck is going on? I'm going to middle school. I don't like know what life is because I'm 12. And now my dad all of a sudden wants me to know Spanish and everything about his life. And I don't understand it. And yada, yada, yada. So it's really cute. There's a lot of Spanish in it. We learned a lot of Spanish. Jared learned a lot of lessons. We really like talking about a lot of stuff. She meets a boy that she has a crush on and the boy ends up being gay. So there's a lot of really good discussions. I loved it. Super duper good. I gave it 5 stars. The next book that I finished in February was Their Eyes Were Watching God. This is a very classic recommended book that was written in 1937. And it's by Zora, Neal, Hurston. Oh, so I should let you guys know that besides the books that I wrote with my kid or in my book clubs, they were all by Black or African American authors because February was Black History Month. So I made it a goal of mine to read as many books as possible by Black and African American authors. So there's only, I think out of the 14, I think I only have, actually I'll tell you right now, I have 3 out of the 14 that were not Black or African American. So that was a whole experience in itself that I'll go over at the end. So Their Eyes Were Watching God is a classic, and it's just a really, like, I think it's kind of sad, but kind of heartwarming story of a woman set back in the time of the 1930s. And her name is Janie. It kind of gave me Where the Crawdads Sing vibes, where it's like, you just feel really bad for this main character growing up in the time that she's growing up in. And like slavery, poor, poverty, all the bad things. It was really good. It's always highly recommended by a lot of people. The way I found all these books was literally through my library apps that I have. I just looked at their Black History Month section. Because I had curated this beautiful long list of African American authors on Goodreads. And then I went to my library apps and none of the books I selected were available at my libraries. So I decided to just look and see what was under the Black History Month section of my 2 library apps, Hoopla and Libby. That's how I found all of these books. Continuing on. Third book completed in February was My Sister the Serial Killer. If you have like 4 or 5 hours to kill, I think, yeah, the audiobook is only 4 hours. The actual page count is 226 pages. If you have 4 hours to kill on an airplane or in a long car ride or a Sunday afternoon, this is like a great afternoon book. It's weird to call it a comedy, but it's like a satirical comedy. The title is what it is. I gave it 4 stars. Just because I feel like I'll never reread it and it wasn't like super duper memorable, but it's just the story of this woman and her sister is a serial killer. Her sister kills her boyfriends, and everybody doesn't believe the main character. They're like, no, your sister's not a serial killer. That's ridiculous. Don't be silly. So that's kind of like the comedy part of it. But yeah, it does cover some other serious stuff. There are some trigger warnings with like childhood traumas and whatnot. So maybe look into that before you read it. But it's kind of glossed over. They don't really, I feel like they didn't push the trauma triggers too heavily in the book. It was more like a very just light, easy read. So yeah, pretty good. 4 stars. The next book I read was one of my all-time favorites of the month, and it was Children of Blood and Bone. And I did a lot for this in my bullet journal. I added like a lot of little openings and leaflets, did some doodling. This is like a pocket that has a map in here of the world. This is a fantasy series, a young adult fantasy series. This has very big mixed reviews. If you are a huge fantasy reader, you probably will find this very cliche and boring. That's what I gathered from the reviews. And now that I've read a lot more, I can see why some people were like, meh. But I'm easily entertained. And even if things are cliche, I still love them and I can still be entertained. So I loved this. This is a full-on fantasy, Children of Blood and Bone. There are people that were born as people with magic and people that were born without. At some point in history, the people that were born with magic were all killed, and all of the artifacts that would help them be magical were killed. And these kids slash teen, I think they're more like teenagers, have to go on a quest with their 3 artifacts to bring magic back to the world. It is a trilogy, so I'm going to read the second book hopefully this month in March, because I really like this book. It was really good. As far as YA goes, I was so super happy that there wasn't tons of YA drama or romance. There were some cheesy romances thrown in there, but I feel like they weren't overdone. Sometimes I feel like if you're in the midst of saving the world, you shouldn't be worried about whether the guy is kissing you or not. So, but I'm also not a young adult anymore. So I'm glad that this didn't have too much of that, and that's why I think I was so obsessed with it. I got really lost in the story. The narrator is wonderful. I wish I would have written it. Bonnie Turpin, I think, is the narrator for this one. And she is just a really good narrator. She ended up narrating another book that I read later this month as well. So, Children of Blood and Bone, gave it 5 stars. Awesome read. Whether you're YA or not, I think it's really good. Okay. So what is that? This is like number 5. 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so the 5th book I read was An American Marriage. This was on Oprah Winfrey's book club list. So it came up in my library. This was rated really high, but I gave it 2 stars, which is probably an unpopular opinion. You can at me in the comments if you want to. I don't mind hearing other people's opinions or not liking my opinions. That's fine. I literally wrote an entire page. I'll show you that I taped into my book. This is like an entire like word vomit of how I felt during the last like hour-ish of the audiobook. And whenever I started this book, I thought that it was set back in the day. Whenever I mean back in the day, I mean back whenever gender stereotype roles were very prominent, patriarchy and misogyny was very prominent. But then I realized that it's supposed to be set in modern times. So the misogyny really started to get on my nerves. And then towards the end, it got really bad, and it was really hard for me to read it, and I almost didn't finish it, which is why I gave it 2 stars. But the whole premise is that these young people get married. They're only married for like a year and a half or something, and the husband gets wrongly convicted for rape and goes to prison, and he has to do 5 years, I believe, maybe 7. I don't even remember all the details because I just didn't want to listen to it after so long. It bugged me so much. I'll try not to complain too much about this book. So What I really, really, really loved about this book were the letters. There was a good stint in the middle where we were just reading letters back and forth between the couples. And with the audiobook, they had a female and a male narrator, which I really love, because listening to a man try to do a female voice or a female trying to do a male's voice can kind of get old, especially whenever it came to these letters. So I'm really glad that we got both vocal representation there. I really loved the letters. I really loved hearing both sides of the story. And you know, with the way it ended and how angry I was getting at the main character after talking to people whenever the book was done, I think it was probably meant for you to kind of not like him. And I think it was meant to portray what happens when someone goes to prison and what changes they go through when they go to prison for survival. So I think the pure hatred that I had for that character was probably wanted by the author. Maybe. I don't know. But it was really hard to finish. But I did finish it. The ending wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. So I gave it 2 stars. I will definitely never read it again because it upset me so much. But that's my personal opinion. I think it was by far my least favorite book of the month. Or of the year, actually. Yeah, I can't think of one that I disliked more than An American Marriage. I'm sorry. Not sorry. Okay, the next book I finished was The Proposal. This is on the Reese Witherspoon book club list. This was okay. It was like a classic romance. I gave it 3 stars. It was a super nice change of pace from An American Marriage because it was not depressing. But it was also very cliche, very predictable romance story about her being in a horrible relationship, and they go to a baseball game and he proposes and she's like, no way, Jose, and now he's embarrassed. And then she meets a guy and they're supposed to just be friends, but it turns out to be more. It's like, I don't know, it was very cliche. It was very cute. But I gave it 3 stars because, again, as far as romances go, there weren't any like crazy twists. No characters were like my super favorite. Yeah, it was like, it was okay. If you like romance novels, you'll probably be entertained by this, but otherwise, there is some steam in it. I think I forgot to write that down in my journal, but there was like a little bit of steam. Not too bad. I've definitely read worse. Okay, so I think we're on to book number 7, maybe. What is that? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so book number 7 that I finished was Stella by Starlight. This is a middle grade book, but I think it's really good for all ages to read. I felt like Their Eyes Were Watching God and Stella by Starlight go hand in hand. They're both written, they're meant to both take place in the same time in the 30s with the KKK, racism, segregation, the whole bit, slavery, all of those things. But Stella by Starlight is written from a girl's perspective. I believe in the book she's about 10 or 11 maybe. I can't remember, but I believe she's about a 10 or 11-year-old girl. And so she tells the story of her growing up in this town and the KKK appearing in her town from her point of view. And I thought it was a really good book. I think I did not read this with my kid, but I think I will in the future if he's interested in it. I think it allows for really good conversation about what happened in history and for children to understand what happened in history from another child's eyes. And I think that's also something that's not visited very often, is how these things affected those children that feel like it was a long time ago, but the 1930s were not that long ago. So yeah, I gave it 5 stars. All right. Number 8 was Honey Girl. Honey Girl was another like romance contemporary novel. It was a queer novel, so I believe the author identifies as a queer person. If I remember correctly, whenever I looked her up, it's Morgan Rogers. And this was probably the first time that I really did not like a narrator, and the first time that I learned that you can speed up audiobooks. Because there was no reason for this 293-page book to take over 10 hours, in my opinion, and it got really slow and like just droned on and on. So I had to speed it up towards the end. But the book itself was okay. I gave it 4 stars. It's kind of like another cliche romance and / finding yourself in your early 20s. She basically finishes her doctorate degree as a lesbian Black woman. And she goes off to celebrate in Vegas and ends up marrying somebody that she's never met before. And whenever she wakes up, the woman that she married is gone. And she's trying to piece back her memory with who she married and why, which then turns into her trying to find her true self, and dealing with a lot of her childhood trauma and going to therapy and all that stuff. So I think it's a really, really good book that way. It has really good representation that way. Yeah, I gave it 4 stars. I think it's a really well represented romance novel, in my opinion. The 8th book I read was The Hate You Give, and this was amazing. I believe this is the other book that was narrated by Bonnie Turpin. I believe, if I remember correctly. I should start writing this down. I wrote a lot of quotes from this book. So The Hate You Give is apparently a Netflix movie or series. I'm not sure because I haven't watched it yet. And The Hate You Give title comes from the Tupac song. So that was like the first thing I wrote down whenever they go over it was like thug life. And so apparently Tupac says that thug life stands for the hate you give little infants fucks everybody. And I thought that was amazing. I just remember repeating that in my head over and over again and continuing to think about it in different ways. And what's cool is in the book, they also break that idea down in many different ways. And so I really loved this book. It was like 30 minutes in and I was bawling my eyes out with like full emotion. Like they somehow had you connect to this character so quickly and you were so immersed, and like just the most horrible, tragic thing imaginable happens. And I really don't want to spoil it. I really just think everybody should read it, but I'm getting emotional thinking about it. So it drives really hard with police brutality and racism that's in modern times. And even though it was released in 2017, I felt like it was hitting the nail on the head for what happened with the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020. So I think that's why I got so emotional so fast. But the quotes that I wrote down, I feel like I need to read to you. So the one quote is said by a character in the book that is a cop. He's a black man that is a cop. And so at one point he says, "He was more than any bad decision he made. I hate that I let myself fall into that mindset of trying to rationalize his death. And at the end of the day, you don't kill someone for opening a car door. If you do, then you shouldn't be a cop." Another quote was said by the main character, Star. And she says, "The messed up part, there are so many more. Yet I think it'll change one day. How? I don't know. When? I definitely don't know. Why? Because there will always be someone ready to fight. Maybe it's my turn. Others are fighting too." And she's talking about all of the other people that have been wrongly murdered, and she lists them. So I believe it's in the epilogue or in the last chapter, she lists them. There's 13, I think, that I wrote down. Oscar Grant, Mayana Stanley Jones, Trayvon Martin, Rakia Boyd, Michael Brown, Eric Gardner, Tamir Rice, John Crawford, Ezell Ford, Sandra Bland, Alton Sterling, Filado Castile, and then the last one was Emmett Till. Emmett Till was one that was really famous back in the 50s, I believe, and it was the boy that the police beat so badly that they couldn't recognize him anymore. So it's super sad, but good at the same time. I gave it 5 stars because it was incredible, even though it had a lot of emotion to it. And I did research on all of those people that I just listed, and all their stories are incredibly tragic. So look them up if you want, but it's not going to be a happy day whenever you find out all the ways that they died. Yeah, I think it's a super important book to watch. I'm excited to see the movie. I'm not sure how they're going to fit 444 pages / 12 hours of book content into a movie, so that makes me nervous. But I am excited to see it. I am a person that really enjoys all media, so I can often separate the book from the TV version, whether it's a show or a movie, and I can like both for what they are. So I am excited to see it. I just think that it won't be able to evoke the same emotions that I got from the book. Okay, I'll stop talking about that one because I know I can go on forever about it. I read another book with my son that was a graphic novel. So this is one that wasn't written by a Black or African American author. It was called The Breakaways. My son actually read this to me. It's rated middle grade as a graphic novel, and I would say middle grade is borderline. I think it's more like young adult fiction. Basically like a middle school aged girl joins the soccer team because she has like a crush on the girl that's doing the sign-ups. So she joins and then she realizes that there's like an underdog team and she's on the underdog team. She's not on the team with like the cool pretty girl that she has a crush on. And so it just goes through her doing this. Me and my son were like, we gave it 4 stars. So in the book, she has these moments where she's daydreaming or she's doodling at her desk and she's writing her own story. And I wish they would have done more with that, because at times you would jump into this daydream or storyline that she's working on. And then like you would just kind of get back from it and go back to normal life. But I wish they would have done more with that sub daydream story, because I really loved that concept. Otherwise, it was an okay book. You know, teenagers finding themselves. It had a lot of representation with like girls on the soccer team. Like she kind of likes girls, but she kind of likes boys. She's not quite sure. Somebody on the team is like, I'm a boy. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. I'm glad you're a boy. And what was really cute was my son was like, well, duh, I thought she was always a boy. And I was like, well, that's the thing. He has always been a boy. It's just that he looked like a girl before, and now he's matching his outsides to his insides. So that was a cool conversation that we got to have. Yeah, there was like all the things in there. Friendships breaking up and making up. A lot of good combos. But otherwise, I was like, it was okay. The next book, we're almost done. Yeah, a couple more. The next book I read was Becoming by Michelle Obama. She's the narrator, so that's really cool. If you like Michelle Obama's voice, you'll like that book, that audiobook. It's just her autobiography or her memoir all the way up until Trump becomes president. So her life as a child all the way until 2016. Yeah, 2016. I think that I went in detail on my Goodreads about this, but I truly love reading, I truly loved reading about Obama and the politics that happened before, during, and after before and during his time as president from her perspective. I think that whenever you read about somebody through the eyes of the person that loves them most, it's so incredibly fascinating. Like, nobody knows that person's flaws more than the person that chose to marry them and chose to stay married to them every single day of their lives, right? Or like, I feel like moms kind of have a bias. As a mom, I know that I would have a bias and not want to see the bad parts. The person that's married to them sees the bad parts every single day way more than any of us ever will, right? Like, she knows if he flicks toothpaste on the counter. She knows if he leaves his socks on the floor. She knows if he doesn't put the toilet seat down, right? So she, as a wife, sees his flaws every single day, and she still chooses to love him for everything that he is. And she chooses to support him through every crazy idea he's ever had. And I'm using she and he, but you can use they, them, or flip the she and the he. That's just how it is whenever you have long-term committed relationships and partnerships. So I loved reading about Obama through her eyes, and it made me want to read more First Lady books, even for men that I don't really like in the world. I want to read more books from their partner's eyes to kind of see why they love and support them so much, even though they make all those flaws. I find that fascinating. And that's what I found unexpected about this book. I thought I was going to learn a lot about Michelle Obama, which I did, but I learned even more about how much of a human being the president of the United States is. He's just a regular person, and he makes mistakes. All of them make mistakes. But, you know, his wife loves him anyway for it every single day. So that's that. The one quote that I wrote down that I find super duper important, especially for women, is she talks about how important voting is. And she says, if a few people stayed home in each neighborhood, it could determine what our kids learned in schools, which healthcare options we had available, or whether or not we sent our troops to war. Voting is both simple and incredibly effective. And I loved that. I loved that quote. I think it's amazing. And it talks about the importance of getting out there to vote. Okay, so I don't know what number we're on. 10 maybe? 11? Whatever. I read the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. Oh my god. If you like fantasy, you need to read the book. If you like reading, you need to read the book. If you like anything, you need to read the book. It is the most mind-blowing book I've ever read in my life, and I feel bad for all other books that come after it because it like kind of ruined them for me. It's also a trilogy. It's called the Broken Earth trilogy. So the other 2 are on my list. I'll probably read the 2nd book in March as well, along with the Children of Blood and Bone. It's just amazing. I literally don't want to ruin anything. I just want you to read it. You need to read it. It is an amazing book. If you are brand new to reading, like you read maybe 1 book last year, I would probably just put this on your list and get to it later. It is dense because it's a fantasy and they have to build the whole world. There's a lot of character building. There's a lot of character connecting things that you have to keep up with. Yep. It's also written in 2nd person point of view for like a third of the time, which means you are the main character. So, as an example, the first couple sentences in the book say, you are she is you. You are Essen, remember? The woman whose son is dead. Right? So you are the main character, and that is the perspective that you are reading from for about a third of the book. That's not ruining anything for you because the synopsis says the same thing. And it's literally like the first couple sentences of the book. So it's a must read. It's a must read. If you are brand new to reading, put it on your list so that you can read it later. I assure you, you will love it. Probably have a notebook next to you so that you can take notes about characters if you're like me and you like taking notes about characters because you're like a nerd and can't just enjoy the book. You have to like write everything down and think about it later whenever you go to bed. It's a really good book. Yeah. It's a long one. It's 500 pages. So the audiobook is amazing. The audiobook is narrated by one of the best known narrators of all time. She has all kinds of awards. Her name is Robin Mills, I believe. Robin Mills, something like that. I also bought this book on Google Play, and I bought the book track version, which means they add a soundtrack to the audiobook as you're listening to it, which was just so amazing. If you ever have the opportunity to listen to an audiobook with a book track to it, do it. It's so next level. It's wonderful. I love it. Okay, so we're almost done, I promise. The next book I read was A Marvelous Light. It was for the Plant-Based Bride book club because we are reading around the world this year. So this one took place, the author was Australian. So that took care of that region that we were following for this year. This was an okay book. I gave it 3 stars. Did I give it? Yeah, I gave it 3 stars. Sorry. I white-outed one of them because I accidentally colored too many in. So I gave it 3 stars. It's a gay romance historical fiction book that has some other like things in it. There's like a murder mystery / gay romance / really, really steamy scenes with gay romance / magic / back in the day British times where gay people weren't allowed. There's a lot going on in this book, which is why I gave it 3 stars. I feel like not one thing was very well done. And there is way, way, way more steam than I expected. And I think that's how most people felt from discussing it with the book club members. If you don't mind steam, the steam isn't bad, but I did not expect it. So while I'm at my day job, I have to turn it off because my face is turning bright red from the incredible detail that the person's going into. I think the reason I gave it 3 stars, the biggest reason why I gave it 3 stars is that I listened to the book and I was like, okay, none of this is what I expected, and nothing feels like it was a fully formed idea. And then I did research on the author and I was like, interesting. This is about gay British men in like the 1800s, I think. And the author is a white, straight Australian woman. So I'm not quite sure how accurate her perspective is that she wrote. It feels kind of weird. So I just left it at that. There's a second book apparently coming out about the main character's sister. I might read it. I might not. We'll see. Either way, if you like steamy books, go for it. If you like queer books, go for it. If you like murder mysteries, probably not going to scratch your itch. If you like books about magic, it's probably not going to scratch your itch. So that's that. Okay. The last book I read that I snuck in literally right at the ending on the 28th was Lakewood. Lakewood was amazing. Amazing. Lakewood is about a woman that lives near one of those like medical testing facilities, and she decides to join because she's, you know, hurting for money and her mom has health problems and yada yada yada. So she goes and joins, and then from there it just kind of goes really crazy with the amount of stuff they do to the people, and it turns into one of those books where you can't really trust the narrator because the narrator is getting a bunch of drug tests done to her. So it gets kind of hazy and confusing through the middle, and you're wondering what's reality and what's not because she's wondering what's reality and what's not. So that's a really cool perspective. If you don't like those kind of books where you're wondering what's real and what isn't, then you might not like it. So I think it has some mixed reviews because of that, but I thought it was really interesting. What also makes it interesting is that it's been proven that the medical testing companies that they talk about, or the medical testing companies back in the day used to target African American and impoverished people on purpose because they thought they were less important. I mean, I'm pretty sure that was like the basics of Planned Parenthood, was a facility that was trying to make sure that Black people didn't reproduce. You can Google that and fact check me, but I feel like that's what I learned in college women's history class, which is really sad because Planned Parenthood is an amazing thing now, but it was built on lies and deceit and racism, and so that's really sad. So it's the American way, I guess. Lakewood was really good. I really liked it. I gave it 5 stars. It was an excellent way to end the month. Yeah. So those were all 14 books that I read. As far as stats go, I did 14 books total. I gave an average star. My average star rating for all 14 books was a 4.2. The amount of pages was 4,845. The amount of hours was 143. The average days that it took me to read a book was 3.9. The LGBTQIA plus representation was about 43%. So 43% of the books had representation, which means 57% did not. I can do math. Okay. The longest book I read was Children of Blood and Bone. The shortest book was Their Eyes Were Watching God. That's based off of page numbers, by the way. Okay, so what else? 64% were adult level books. 14% were YA, 20% were middle grade. The genres were all over the place. I had like 1 nonfiction, 1 graphic novel, 2 romance, 2 child literature, 2 contemporary, 2 fantasy, 2 thriller, 2 history. What else? I bought 3 books. I borrowed 4 from Hoopla, 5 from Libby, and I got 2 physical books from my actual library. The years published that I read through was 2 from 2021, 1 from 2020, 2 from 2019, 5 were from 2018. That was a really popular year, I guess. 1 from 2017, 2 from 2015, and then Their Eyes Were Watching God was from 1937. As far as authors go, 93% were female. That means only 1 book was a genderqueer person, and I believe, I can't remember which book that was now that identified as genderqueer. I believe that was the Honey Girl one, if I remember correctly. Either way, there was only 1 book by a genderqueer person. Oh no, it was the author of the Breakaways. Okay, so 1 was genderqueer, the other 13 were female. Yeah, I don't know why a lot of popular books by African American authors are not men. That's very interesting to me. 1 author was from England, 1 was from Australia, 12 were from America. Like currently, that's where they reside. As far as ethnicity goes, 2 were white, 1 was Guatemalan, 9 were African American, and 2 were Nigerian. So that's ethnicity distribution. So yeah, that was that. I don't think there's anything else that I had to share with you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to comment or message me. Follow me on Instagram at JerryBerry. I'm pretty sure that's my Instagram is JerryBerry. Either way, it'll be in the description. Yeah. I took a little hiatus because of my birthday month, so I'll be posting my weekly interviews again on Fridays. I'll keep posting about the books I read every month. For March, it's Women's History Month, so I'm trying to read books written by women. Yeah. Let me know what your reading goals are this month. Let me know if you agree with my reviews. Let me know if you disagree with my reviews. Let me know if you have book recommendations. I always love adding books to my list. My TBR list is just infinite at this point, and I don't mind it. I like having tons of options. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. Comment below. All right, thank you guys. Bye.